Welcome, everyone, to Recovery the Whole Enchilada. I'm Peg McDermott here with my co host, Heather Hagerman. Hello, Heather.
Hey, Peg.
Nice to see you. Welcome. We are a podcast dedicated to exploring layers of healing and transformation within our recovery community, amongst each other, amongst Heather and I, because we experience a lot of healing between us just doing these podcasts. So it's been a blessing for sure. Today, we want to talk about processing guilt and shame and the difference between guilt and shame, how we process those emotions, moving forward from past actions that may have triggered guilt or shame, and then some self-forgiveness tool. First of all, I'd love to hear from you, Heather, what your experience was, like what it was like and how it's changed for you with regard to guilt and shame. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about the difference between the two and then how it's affected you in your recovery.
Hey, it's so funny. I really love acronyms and so here's the acronym for shame. Should have already mastered everything. Isn't that a good one?
It's great.
Yeah. And so that could be me later on in life, especially the more years that I have of sobriety. And then I fall back to behavior that is before sobriety. I would actually feel ashamed that I should be better by now. Have you ever gone through that, Peg?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
The should haves, the should be's that we're shooting on ourselves.
The
Yes.
sitting on ourselves is a big one. So shame is, I think, needs to be the work around shame. And I'm just going to stay with shame for this moment. Really needs to be done slowly and carefully because it's like trauma. I'm just going to stay with the shame lane right now because I want to get this out. It's so important that we understand as human beings that shame is been used culturally as healthy shame to cultivate the correct behavior in especially as young children growing up. You know, what? Don't hit your brother. Why did you hit your brother? And there's this behavior that the child has there's a healthy shame being used around it. I honestly don't think there's any, I don't know. I will debate whether shame should even be involved in the development of children, however, but it is part of just part of cultures everywhere. The healthy shame is to help you to have better behavior next time. Okay. But what can happen in what becomes toxic shame is the behavior isn't what the child or the person picks up as being to be ashamed of. It's more about there's something wrong with me. I need to be ashamed for being me. That just being like it's like toxic shame is like, I am shame and I am a bad, horrible person and I hate myself. And that is kind of like how shame sort of just digs its roots into us. And so that's one aspect. Anything you want to add to that with shame, just to talking about sort of what healthy shame, toxic shame, you've heard of those?
I've never been able to put healthy and shame together for me in my head. I think just for me, shame has been about either I'm thinking or someone else wants me to think that I am bad, that I am wrong, that I am less than the wonderful human that I am. And there's a feeling that I would get, and sometimes still do, it's not as frequent, of where shame sits in my body. And for me, it's sort of like in a gut place where I just feel that sort of, I want to say lump in my gut, but it's more like my gut just feels like it tenses up and I feel like I'm going into fight or flight. And it was a way in my growing up, it was a way to manipulate me and manipulate my behavior, make sure I fall in line. And it worked. You know, I mean, when you're a little person, you don't know. You don't even know the word shame. You just know how it makes you feel. And you're like, I don't really want to feel like this. And I don't want my caregiver to think less of me. So I will do what I have to do to make sure they're happy. And then as I grew and I got into recovery, because the disease of alcoholism for me really used shame as a way to get to me. And it was like probably one of the primary triggers I'd use to drink heavily was shaming and feeling shameful. So I've never been able to put together, I've never known shame to have a healthy layer, and maybe it does because you have much more experience around the modality and how it affects people and how you're able to work with them. For me, I had to really discern, I had to, first of all, separate myself from my behaviors. And so the behaviors were dysfunctional, but I would think because I was behaving badly, I was bad. And I had to learn to separate those. Like, I displayed unhealthy behaviors, but I'm not a bad person. And the recovery really helped me to sort of separate those two things. And then it also helped me to see how I let shame really affect how I thought of myself and how I might even use shame to manipulate others, because that's what I was taught. And then I learned the differences between guilt and shame, where guilt was really more about behaviors and shame was more about me. And then I had to say to myself, if I felt guilty, why am I feeling guilty? Did I do something to promote this guilt? Did my behavior cause this guilt to come on? And sometimes I would just feel guilty just because I was drawing air. I was here and I was just wrong. And that is it. There's a fine line between that and shame. So these two subjects are very powerful in how they were used to manipulate me, us. I can only speak from my experience around them, how it affected my drinking and how it affected how I thought of myself, and how I had to unlearn a lot of things. It's a program of subtraction. And so I had to really start unlayering these unhealthy images and thoughts of myself. That makes sense.
Just to kind of go back a little bit over what healthy shame and the way to say it in another way to like think about this is it's a brief targeted feeling of discomfort when you recognize you've done something wrong and you probably want to say sorry for it. Whereas the toxic shame, like you were saying, Peg, is very ingrained. It's pervasive. There's this feeling of worthlessness, and it stems from this inherent belief that you're bad. So rather than like healthy shame, you say, I made a mistake. While toxic shame is, I am a mistake. Yeah. And so that's been the journey, is to understand and to give myself a break and begin to, like, first of all, let's just start with the fact is I am not a mistake, and I am a worthwhile human being. But when I've had parents that ruled using shame tactics, shame on you, Heather. My God.
Or you should be ashamed of yourself.
You should be ashamed of yourself. Now, if I had everything in place and I had a very grounded, secure attachment with these people that loved me, I could handle that. They probably wouldn't even be saying that because they have the consciousness to not say things like that. But because they didn't, I couldn't differentiate. So I carried that way on into my adult years. I'm bad. I'm broken. I'm damaged. I'm the mistake. And so it was just So just add alcohol now to that thinking, and I'm a mess. I'm making lots of mistakes, and I'm perpetuating the shame to the bone at this point,
Wow.
So once I started to, when I got into recovery and let go of the drinking and started to work with this, what was left over, my journey had to be really about moving away from this idea that I am a mistake, that I am not a mistake. I've made mistakes, that I am not this horrible person, that I am really a good person. And I
Yeah.
remember saying to people, really a good person. I don't know why I got so drunk and blacked out and hit this poor woman at a stoplight. I'm a good person.
Mm.
But the world said, shame on you. You're drunk. You're a horrible person. Who does that? And so with each situation in drinking, it just perpetuates it. This, you're so full of shame. You're so toxic that it's so hard to break free of that. So when you come to your first meeting and someone says to you, you're welcome here. I love you. I am here for you. And I'm going to love you until you love yourself. When you come to a group of people that speak to you like that in itself was shocking to me. And I think I probably went into a guilt spiral, and I haven't even talked about guilt, but it's like, these are the things that, and I'll tell you, my first mentor said to me, screw guilt and shame. Like that they cannot be part of your vocabulary. And that my journey is to remake myself. And the only one that's going to be able to do that is going to be me. And just before we met, we were talking about this, like some of the tools just in the beginning were just show up, get connected with people, pick up the phone, get professional care, start to layer it into how you start your day. There's this beautiful ritual that we're taught. Pick up a little reader, read a daily read. There's great reads out there for all kinds of things. Start your day with that. Change the frequency of thoughts, because I would only wake up feeling shame about me being alive. I shouldn't be here. What a burden I must have been for my mom and dad, or particularly my mother. I just always felt like I was a burden. And that she always used it then, and she went on to use guilt. And that guilt is just another way of keeping shame alive, right? Because it's so connected. And the guilt is where we just live in that perpetual state of like, I am always doing something wrong. I will never be good enough. I am just so guilty of failing this life. And so that guilt really had to go. And so, yeah, but again, when we look at this, we have to also understand that these beliefs are so deep and ingrained, and what it's going to take is just that safe connection. It kind of comes back a lot to feeling safe, being around safe people, being safely connected to people that are also doing this kind of work, or the professional that's helping you with this. Like, this is one of the most important things that we are seen and heard and valued. And I've shared this in multiple podcasts, but this is like vital, that not only are we having that with each other, but that I'm doing it with myself.
Right.
I'm valuing myself. I make stupid mistakes to this day. I mean, wow, go figure. And I could start off with that, like, wow, I should be better. And you know what? I kind of get that little prick, and then I go, you're not going to pierce yourself with that. You are a miracle to be sitting here today. Peg, we are miracles that we sit here today, when by all rights we shouldn't be here because of our mental illness. It wanted us dead, but it would settle for us being screwed up.
Right.
And we could be here screwed up talking, but we're not. But we are, yeah, this is not something that's going to easily go away. But I think a lot of the journey is to catch it and to listen to the voice in your head that starts to berate you. Why can't you put your keys in the pocket of your purse? Why can't you hang your coat up? Why did you just trip on your shoes? You put them at the front door. I could have this mean, like, and then instead it's like, okay, come on, you got to do better, girl. Just do better.
Right.
It's not my essence of me hasn't changed. I am absolutely okay. It's just my behavior is really, really ridiculous at times. It's the difference. We just got to not take ourselves so seriously and not be so hard on ourselves.
You're right. That being hard on ourselves is a big, huge characteristic of recovering alcoholics and addicts. That ism is very powerful disease. And I think that there is healthy guilt. And I say that because it's information that I've needed to determine, oh, that behavior wasn't what I'd like to see myself doing or saying or being. And it's information, it's a signal to me that I need to either make an amends to someone, to myself, and correct it, change, right? I apologize and then I need to change. And so we're human, we're growing, and yes, we're going to make mistakes. We're supposed to make mistakes while we're here. That helps us grow and smooth out the rough edges, for me anyway. And so guilt for me, I think there is a healthy guilt in that it helps me self-correct if my behavior isn't where I would like it to be. But shame for me has just been a weapon. It's been weaponized since I was little. And I have learned not to allow it into my space anymore. And so that's why I try not to watch the news. I try not to be around other sort of dysfunctional people, because that part of that dysfunction is shaming. And I have to be aware, like you said earlier, being self-aware. What am I saying to myself? How am I feeling where is it in my body that I'm feeling this? And really talking to myself and saying, no, you're not wrong. You are not bad. This is something you'd like to change, not repeat, and to make amends if you need to, but you aren't bad. And I have to keep playing that new tape over and over again to override the old tapes, because those old tapes can come up. And if I'm not self-aware, then I kind of go unconscious and then my behaviors follow. And I don't want to be in a state anymore where I am not self-aware or present-minded. And I needed the self-talk for me and outside help and talking to other healthy people like you to say, hey, I'm feeling like this, or this and that happened, and checking in with another person that I trust to say, I'm feeling guilty about this situation and I need to talk about it. Or I got a pang of shame around this situation and I need to talk about it. And get feedback from people that are healthy and understand. I'm not going to go to someone who I say this to and their eyes glaze over. I need to talk to people that understand this journey and how we feel and how we think about ourselves. So for me, processing that is talking about it, being aware of it, talking to safe people about it, talking to myself in a healthier way. And that eventually doesn't become as much of a habit. It doesn't become my default. My default gets healthier.
I just like the progress when we sit here and we talk, and then I get these realizations that I'm not the same person I used to be. But it didn't happen like a light switch. It just has taken its time. I mean, it's not a quick process, like I said earlier, but if you just keep doing the right things and trying to do right action, and I'm always trying to be very aware of my words. Wow. So, I feel like guilt is this feeling that comes over a specific action that I've taken, but then shame comes from a feeling of low self-worth. Like there's the toxic shame. But I'll just share a recent event. So So my husband is retired and he's in the house and he's around me all the time. I'm still working, so I'm in and out. But he worked in a place that had a lot of loud sounds. So I think his hearing's not that great. But I'll just say that probably not a good idea to try to talk to people from another room. They're in one room and you're in another room. It just doesn't work out, whether you have hearing problems or not. And so we've discussed this and we've said, how can we have a kinder way of communicating and not yell from opposite ends of the house? Because we've fallen into that before. And so we do it well. And then one afternoon I was in the hallway. He was down in a room and I was saying something to him and I was going out the door, my coat on. I didn't want to go back to the doorway and talk to him. I was saying something. And instead of, and it must have just irritated him, and he never does this, but he raised his voice at me. And I'm telling you, okay, so we're going to probably do a talk show on triggers, right? This was such a trigger. Wow. But what's so beautiful, Peg, is I just shut my mouth, continued out the door, just continued, didn't say a word, didn't go back, just continued to walk out the door. Okay. And then I opened the door and then I slammed the door really loud. Now that wasn't great. Okay. Okay. That was not the best. So I have a little bit of guilt about that action. Okay. I don't feel like it affects my self-worth with Shane. It's just a little guilt about that. So when I came home later, I said, I'm sorry I slammed the front door like that. He goes, oh, he goes, were you angry with me? And I'm like, well, I was irritated, but I felt like it's best for me just to leave at times like that. I just want to say that's huge progress. And this is how we start to get that shame part down. And yeah, we have a little bit of a guilt thing. We do things that I feel a little guilt about that wasn't the right thing to do. But guess what I do now? I say, I'm sorry. I'll do better. I did do better. I don't beat myself up like, what an awful person you are. You're such a lowly person. No, you just were irritated. You had a reaction. It's okay. Try to do better. Do.
And how would you have handled that differently before being more self-aware around guilt?
I would have charged into the room and I would have said, how dare you effing raise your voice at me, you effing. I mean, I cannot believe what a horrible person I've been. I don't have shame about that. I have a little guilt, but I do know that I am in recovery, and that is just part of the mental illness thing. And that's another topic is rage, because rage is another thing that rules up, and especially when it's a trigger. Where'd the trigger come from? This was my mom in another room, or my dad. It was the same thing. It went back in time. I was this little girl and I could never yell at them. Now I'm going to yell at this man who loves me. I mean, that's not right. Thank goodness I'm quick, fast, I catch it, and I'm definitely doing better. But it has been a long journey because I used to really be vicious, a vicious human.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to tell you that.
I could be pretty nasty myself, but that's a good example of like moving past actions or behaviors, like how you've been able to sort of move past that, even though maybe there was a part of you that wanted to storm in and F you and that, but you didn't. You left and you made your feelings known with the door, but you apologized about that. Now, I was just going to share with you that I had the same situation over the Christmas holiday, whereas with a friend, she'd had a difficult time. I think I told you this story, and she was angry about what was going on in her life. She wasn't angry at me, but she was angry, and I could feel that anger, and I started to take it on, right? And so she said to me, the plumber's going to be here to fix the air ducts or whatever. Could you move your car? And they weren't going to be there till like 5, and it was like 4 or whatever. And so I said, sure. And so I'm sitting there and I'm watching TV, and she goes, well, could you go move your car now? And I had already been feeling this sort of tension rising up and kind of resentment towards her. And so I got up and didn't say a word, walked down the hall, walked out the door, and slammed the hell out of the door, right? Like the whole place shook. And she was like, what the hell? And we had an argument and went through that whole process. And I apologized. And I said to her, I said, this is a very good friend I've known for years. And I said, you know what I was doing? I was taking on your anger when it had nothing to do with me. And that was an action and a past behavior. And I was angry about it. And I took it out on your door, and I apologized. And so everything was, we kissed and made up, and she's one of my dearest friends. And I really thought to myself, wow, I would have been like throwing my clothes in the car and saying, see ya, and left, blown up our Christmas, our holiday. And I thought to myself, I think after a while, the program takes a hold of us in those situations. And that's what happened. It was like, no, I don't want to do this. This is someone I love and care for. She's having a hard time right now. And the last thing she needs is to have a supportive friend leave her. And I'm really glad that I didn't do that. It made us closer. But it's like, it just shows that what it was like and how we've changed. Those situations give us information about ourselves. It's like, oh, I did that differently this time. It feels good. It feels better. And I think that moving forward from past actions and learning to, again, be aware of the situation, aware if for me, if I'm taking something on that's not mine to take on, and take care of myself. And the thing that I didn't do was go into the situation, because I knew ahead of time that she wasn't in a good place. What I didn't do, and I'll do better next time, is sort of emotionally armor myself up, like be prepared that this is, because I know her really well. I know this was how she is when she gets, and what can I do to take care of myself so that I don't take it on? So that's been a real growth opportunity for me. And you know what? My higher power will put those situations in my life to show me that. People, places, or things, and show me where I'm still hurting, where I've grown, where I've got a lot of anger that I haven't processed, where I've got a lot of sadness or grief that I haven't processed. That's the beauty of this, is that I can see that. Sometimes it's after the fact, but I at least see it. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Because I did see some progress in my own behavior.
I'm really astounded that things like this, where I used to meet the fire with the fire, I'm not doing that anymore at all. I mean, this is consistent now. I slammed the door, but I didn't use my words. I didn't flip out, and I'm not doing that anymore. I go mute now, and it's just an opposite reaction. Instead of going out, I go in. And I will say that I believe that a lot of the journey in recovery is we're recovering this wholeness, this sense of wholeness, but also this, I want to just say, the elegance and grace, conducting ourselves as women of wisdom, and we're walking the walk. And I want to uphold that in me now. And I also want to know that if I am going to go down into the dirt, because I feel like that's what it is, I'm going down to the dirt to fight like that, it burns me the most. I mean, of course, it hurts the person in front of me, but in the end state, I'm the one walking around triggered by shame again. Like, what is wrong with you? You should be better. Why do you still act like this? Guilt. Oh my God, I've hurt another person. My action hurt them. Why do I keep doing that? And so I don't want to live in those frequencies anymore. I really don't. And I love when I get them now, just like you were saying, just to flip it back around, that these are happening for me, these situations, to see the unhealed parts that I can work on, and not happening to me. And that shift, and I've said this over and over again, is really pivotal when you start to realize that we have more agency in our lives than we believed. I always felt that I was out of control and I couldn't control anything. And I don't know if the word is control, but the thing is, I do have more that I can do by showing up and really understanding these very juicy emotions, because they are probably one of the most hardest emotions to have to deal with. And I probably drank over them my whole life when I was drinking.
Yep.
I was guilty over something I did. I drank. I was ashamed of myself for something, and I drank. And then the cycle continued until you get off the cycle. So any of you listening that are in the cycle, just start to think about ways that you can take care of yourself. The way you can start your day by doing a good reading, by starting to think about like what are the ways that you can take care of your body, your breath, and your mind today, and just really start to find that ultimately. And we said this before we came on. I think the ultimate remedy is self-compassion. Just continue to have that self-loving compassion for yourself, even when you make mistakes, even when you go back into it, just come back out and just really appreciate the fact that, number one, I didn't drink.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't use drugs, but
Nope.
I did use negativity, and I did use shame, and you did use guilt to make myself feel worse. And I don't need to do that anymore. Addiction did that for me. Now I'm not in that frequency of addiction, so I don't need to take over the job of the addiction.
Excellent point. It is. And, that just being self-aware and in those moments where we really do need to, we're at a point where we're feeling those feelings. How can we step away and be more self-aware? Because sometimes for me, I'll get triggered by something and that reptilian part of my brain takes over and I'll get angry or I'll get scared, or usually anger covers up fear for me. And how does one pause? How does one step back and say, like, count to 10? Is that something that's realistic when you're in that state of mind? So for me, I have needed to learn how to stop and breathe and look where my feet are. So I know I'm in the present moment and really get into my body and how I'm feeling, if I'm feeling tense or angry, and really be aware of that and not weaponize it. And even if I have to say to someone, I need to step away for a few minutes, let's come back and revisit this and talk about it. But right now, I just need to just take a minute. And there's nothing wrong with it. That's a tool. And I think self-forgiveness is more of it's a self-loving thing to do, and it becomes a new way of being. It's like, yes, I recognize what happened. I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I'm going to learn. I'm not going to shame myself. I'm going to learn from it, do what I need to do. If I need to make an amends, I do that. And what do I need to do to make sure I don't do it the same way again? Go through
all we can do.
It's all we can do. And everything is, we've learned this over the years. We can do it differently. Those isms are there. They can be much more prevalent in times when we haven't been doing the things that we know keep us sober. And it's not necessarily picking up a drink. We don't want to do that no matter what. But it is the ism. And it's like, okay, this is what this looks like in me. And this is what I can do to change and ask for help.
Yes. And I'm really grateful that in this journey, on this journey, that I have friends that I've let them get to know me and even get to know these parts of me, shame and guilt parts, because I call up and I'm in that place and they hold the space and they tell me I'm beautiful. They love me. I've got this. And breathe.
Breathing is good, slows everything down. And next time, we're going to be talking about understanding grief. That's another good one. So I'm looking forward to that with you, my friend. So we'll plan on seeing you next week with more ingredients for your recovery journey. Remember, you are not alone on this journey of healing and transformation. And until next time, stay strong and keep growing.
Love you, Peg.
Love you too.